The recent release of the Eternals has helped to put the wider scope of the MCU into perspective, giving us a look at the early beginnings of humanity and how they were impacted by this legendary group of covert superheroes, and how the Eternals have altered the course of human history across the eons. Many Marvel fans, particularly avid comic fans, are likely aware of the connection that the team of heroes has with none other than the Mad Titan, Thanos, and given the recent release of the 26th MCU entry, we decided it was a good idea to delve into the full history between Thanos and the Eternals. So stick with us, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, as today we will be covering both Thanos' comic origin and relationship with the Eternals, as well as explore where the MCU seems to have deviated from the concept, and where it seems to have remained faithful to the source material. Spoiler warning for the events of the Eternals, including both the plot and the post-credits scenes. In the comics, Thanos is actually a member of the Eternal race who was born with a condition known as the Deviant Syndrome, which is what resulted in his iconic purple skin tone and immense stature, though most of his brethren look virtually indistinguishable from regular human beings, as we saw with Star Fox. Though in the MCU, Thanos does not display any powers that seem directly related to that of the Eternals, his power set in the comics is far more versatile, and is due to his eternal physiology, gifting him powers that is similar to what we see in the latest MCU entry. He is able to harness the same cosmic energy that we see the likes of Eckardt, Athena, and Kingo utilize throughout the course of the Eternals film, as well as use teleportation and various psionic abilities that his MCU counterpart seems to noticeably lack. When Thanos was first introduced into the MCU, it was highly likely that Marvel Studios didn't know how deep of a dive they would take into the legacy and history of the Eternals, opting instead to make Thanos an incredibly strong, incredibly durable intergalactic warlord with an army at his disposal. And given the wide success of both Infinity War and Endgame, it seems that this iteration of the character was also incredibly formidable as his comic book counterpart within the confines of the MCU. The MCU seemingly confirms that his eternal heritage is intact throughout a variety of different projects that each provide their own piece of his origin, and is the earliest known pseudo-confirmation that he was eternal born, though it is not outright stated, is in Infinity War. In Infinity War, when he and Gamora venture to Vormir in search of the Soul Stone, the Red Skull addresses Thanos as the son of Alars, who was regarded as royalty on the Eternal colony of Titan in the comics, with Thanos' father being an Eternal. And as of the post-credits scene of the Eternals, we know that a significant portion of his bloodline has been adapted from the comics lore into the MCU, with a relative level of accuracy. The first post-credit scene we are introduced to Eros, who is played by Harry Styles and is known for being Thanos' half-brother in the comics, adding more and more missing pieces to the Mad Titan's backstory and slowly filling in the gaps of his history. And one of these missing pieces is why his brother seems to have a human appearance while he himself does not. According to the comics, this is likely due to the Deviant Syndrome, and the MCU seems to indicate that this facet of his origin has carried over into the cinematic universe. In the source material, the Deviant gene is a disease that has cursed him for years, both physically as well as psychologically, as his mother opted to have him killed at birth for being so hideous, with the rest of the Eternals being very beautiful. Though he was vastly physically different from the rest of his peers, he was widely socially accepted, despite having an introverted nature. As an intellectual who studied to be a scientist, Thanos generally opted to keep to himself and avoid social situations whenever possible. Though he was far from perfect, as while he excelled academically, he also searched for a cure for the disease that had plagued him throughout his childhood, this Deviant Syndrome, eventually resorting to studying the genetic material of his fellow Titans to the point of murdering them in his quest for answers. As a teenager, Thanos committed the first murders in the history of Titan, and as he grew, he would go on to kill a total of 18 people on Titan throughout his teenage years, with the last victim being his very own mother, whom he slaughtered in search of answers regarding his heritage and history, both on a physical level as well as a psychological one from a scientific perspective. Though he left Titan of his own accord in the comics, this seems to be the sharpest deviation from the source material, as in the MCU, Titan collapsed under the weight of overpopulation and excessive resource depletion, and Thanos bore witness to the steady demise of his people over a prolonged period of time. even proposing his own heinous solution to the problem, indicating that he stayed on his homeworld until its dying days. It is yet to be confirmed what happened during Titan's final swan song, as we now know that the survivors from Titan and the colony are still alive as well, and whether or not Thanos knew of their departure is completely unknown, though the context of Infinity War seems to hint that the Mad Titan believes the entirety of his population to be dead. As Eros and the remainder of the Titan survivors are explored more in depth, it's highly likely that we'll find out more about Thanos' origin, and it appears as if his origin story and him having a deviant gene that is responsible for his mutation is still intact in the story, and is being carried over into the MCU. Though Thanos is now dead within the mainline MCU, not only does his legacy continue to live on in other forms of his living family members who will continue to tell his stories, but the vast multiverse of infinite possibilities has already introduced us to multiple variants of the Mad Titan from neighboring timelines, hinting that the door may be open for his eventual reappearance in the flesh at some point in the future of the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. But to answer the question plainly that was posed in the beginning of the video, Thanos appears to be an Eternal with an altered deviant gene and deviant syndrome, and can sort of be perceived as a mutant of his homeworld of Titan, and even though the Eternals of Titan accepted him, Thanos always desired to reverse this gene. It's unknown though if this will be something that will carry over into the MCU, but this could explain why his brother Eros looks like a human, just as he did in the comic books, with one of the big questions remaining being, what did the people and Eternals of Titan actually look like? And do they look more like Thanos, or do they look like Eros and normal people? Anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on the various theories proposed in this video? As always, my friends, hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope you have a great day.